The Empower Hour series was created for all of the women out there who have done everything they were supposed to do in life and are struggling to discover what's next. I see you. You know there's so much more out there, but you just don't know how to align with what's next for you. Well, you're not going to struggle anymore. It's time for you to create your new path and fall in love with your life over and over again. See that badass woman over there who has discovered what's next for her? Let's go ask her to share how she did it and become inspired. And if she can discover what's next, so can you. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the EmpowHER Hour. I'm so grateful to have my guest here today. I have my guest, Fatimah Baeshen, who is a friend of mine. We connected through Clubhouse, but we really connected through a mutual friend. And she is just an incredible person. And I'm so excited for her to be here and to share her story. So Fatimah is a public figure who is inspired and inspiring others. That is her mission. And I'm going to go ahead and give her the floor to introduce herself and give a little bit of background on where she started on her journey. So Fatimah, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about you. Where did you start career-wise? How did you get into your initial career? And we'll take it from there.
Hi, Suzanne. Thank you so much for having me on your show, and congratulations on building out this new platform. I've really enjoyed watching your episodes and the women that you've had on here. So kudos to you, and thank you for having me.
Of course.
So a little bit about my background. I've been working now for 20 years. I'm 42, but I still feel like I'm 22, and I don't look a day over 25, just for the record. And so, you know, I had a pretty sinuous career path. I started off right out of undergrad in corporate America through basically a temp pool because it was a recession and I had to kind of figure out my way as things went along. And employment was really hard to come by at the time. And then I winded up I got an undergraduate degree from the University of Massachusetts, which is where Hera and I connected. And that's how I connected.
Yeah.
And I winded up actually really leveraging my sociology degree, even though I didn't really realize that I would to the extent that I did at the time that I went into it, which I'm so grateful for. I just studied it because that's what I was passionate about. And that's what made a lot of sense to me because it helped me understand societies and whatnot. So anyway, I winded up building out basically a 2-decade career in socioeconomic development, international affairs, diplomacy, consulting, and communications. And I think, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
When 2020 hit, I just kind of, because it was a forced pause.
Yes.
It made me just kind of sit down for a hot second and think, okay, I've had a great run, but what do I want my next decade to look like?
Okay. I love that. And I do want to stop for a second because here you are, you had 2 decades of 2 decades worth of career. And your career was an intense one, right? I could imagine how much went into everything that you did, how much went into your education, your background, everything that you did, you know, international affairs. There's probably so much that comes with that. The communications, diplomacy, everything that you were doing, I'm sure had a lot of layers. You had a lot of experience playing a lot of different roles, probably wearing a lot of different hats, and the forced pause that happened, you know, did that disconnect you from the work that you were doing? In other words, did you have to take some time off? Like, what did that look like for you?
That's a great question. So for me, I really try to live a life of no regrets. And even with hindsight, and I'm a Scorpio, so I've like autopsied and dissected and analyzed out of every single thing. I have no regrets, and I'm grateful for every single experience that I've had. But you used a word that is so just, I don't think I could have picked a better word, which is intense.
Yeah.
And I don't shy away from intensity. I'm a Scorpio. That's our thing.
Yes, it is.
100%. I'm happy to have this discussion, but I realized I value service, and I knew that about myself. very early on. I actually got that from when I was in college, in undergrad, waiting tables, and I realized that when I was serving people, and I've said this actually in my own podcast this month or last month, that we're all servants to some extent. I believe that. I genuinely believe that. And I realized that when I was waiting tables, that I really enjoyed public interfacing, which is what helped me when I went into international affairs and diplomacy, and also in consulting with client interfacing.
Yep.
But service really resonated with me. And I think my challenge was I shouldn't say challenge is not the right word, but with the intensity and with your head, I'm just the kind of person where I have to put my head down and just do the work. And basically, for lack of a better word, just climb without realizing that I'm climbing, if that makes any sense. I'm head down and I'm doing the work. And when 2020 hit, I realized with the pause that I value service 100%. That did not change, but I got very clear, crystal clear. It gave me an opportunity to pause and think about my other value sets.
Okay.
And if people haven't read Brene Brown, Adam Grant, these folks talk a lot about this, and it's a game changer in your life. When you get very clear about your values and then subsequently start to calibrate everything in your life to those values. And you sit down and you make a list of like 10, right? Yep. Or 20, whatever it is, inclusion, privacy, whatever it is. And then you start to rank them. And I had to, in order to calibrate my life, I knew I had to get down to like 3, right? Yep. And Brene Brown talks about this. Like, you can have as many as you want, but in order to really kind of calibrate and align your life, you got to break it down to like 3, no more, and in order. And that's tough. That's very tough.
That is really hard.
It's very difficult. It took me a hot second. And I know myself really well. And it still took me a hot second. And so service was still very much a part of that. I knew it, but I also realized that freedom and authenticity very much bookended for me and my value set, service. And I think what I found myself, and again, no regrets, I've really been fortunate enough to work on some of the most impactful scopes for some amazing countries and markets that I will forever be grateful for. But I quickly realized that I was basically pouring all of my energy into the service bucket. And therefore giving it to other stakeholders, other people, other markets, other society. And that martyr complex, I think a lot of folks carry that with them. And what I realize is that I don't have to sacrifice myself 100%. All the time. For 20 years. So I quickly calibrated my life to kind of create some equilibrium, to give myself some freedom to continue serving, and be true to kind of the spherical kaleidoscope that makes up my composite, because I have, I'm originally Arab. I was born in the United States. I was raised here. I'm, I guess, what people would call a practicing Muslim, although depending on who you ask, they might not agree. I don't know. I don't really care. And so but I was born and raised in the deep South, and I have a thick Southern accent, but I was, blessed to go to one of the top graduate schools in this country. I went to the University of Chicago. And so I'm very much an intellectual, but I'm still very spiritual at my core. And that that correlation for a lot of folks doesn't, that's usually a negative correlation. And so I realized that I was all of these things, again, in the pause. I realized that I was all of these strands, that yes, I am 100%, I'm 100% Southern. I'm 100%, Arab. I'm 100% intellectual. I'm 100% spiritual. And I didn't want to put myself, wherever it was, into a box or bracket, and that I'm all of these things converged at any given
Right.
time. And I just wanted to build a life for myself where I could be all of these things all the time
Mhm.
and still serve,
Yep.
and build out a life that afforded me a little bit more freedom. And I want to double click on this for a second. I know I've been talking for a long time, and
No, that's okay. These are amazing. This is an amazing part of your story. This is so important.
freedom for me had nothing to do with anyone who works in a large institution, irrespective. And I've worked all over the world, all over the world.
Right.
Anytime you work for a large institution, whether it's an international development organization or a government institution or an academic institution or whatever, it's a bureaucracy. And
Yes.
all this comes from my sociology, which I
Yep.
love.
Yep.
And so you are going to be a part of a bigger system.
Yes.
And that in and of itself, Max Weber talks a lot about this, who I love, who's a sociologist, to a great extent kind of confines you. You're a bureaucrat, basically.
Yep.
And so even when I was doing consulting and I was in change management and I was part of a system and plugged into institutions to work inside out, basically for the clients, I was always part of a bigger system.
Right.
And that's not blame. That's me, because I believe in service, and I am a transformer to a great extent, and have been pulled into environments to help transform them to progress.
Right.
But that takes a lot of energy, and it takes part of being in the system to do it effective. I used to believe to do it effectively, you have to be in the system.
Right.
And so all that to say that when I say freedom, it's not in the sense of, oh, you're from here and so you weren't free, or, oh, you're this part of religion so you weren't free, or, oh, actually,
right.
No.
Right.
I have been in some of the most liberal places,
yep.
quote unquote, and around some of the most liberal people, and felt very confined. And I've been in some of the most conservative places and around the most conservative people and felt totally free. And so there's no metric. So for me, I had to define what freedom meant for me. And freedom for me became, instead of building a life where I worked my life into work.
Right.
Freedom for me became working work into my life.
Yeah. That's, and I love, there's so many pieces of that I want to touch on and go back on. But I think going back to kind of your like the aha moment when you had the pause and you took time to step back and say, what are my values, and how do those, what are my values? And when you started to peel the layers of that onion away,
it was a 2-year process for me.
Yeah.
It was a 2-year process.
Which I appreciate you saying that, because sometimes people might say, okay, well, what are my, like, let me go figure this out. And like, it is a process. And I love that word process. This word comes up probably in, I would say 98% of the interviews that I've done so far on this show. And when I speak with people too, process is so important to understand, because a lot of times,
100%.
right? Because when we're in a pivotal spot, or we're sitting on a fence, or we imagine, hopefully, like, we're imagining getting to the other side of that, or running across that finish line, whatever that means to us. But what we lose sight of is the finish line is great. That's the bonus. But what's really important is understanding that in order to get from where we are to that finish line, it's going to be hills and valleys. It's going to be a process. It's going to be a lot of trial and error. And I think
100%.
that's, and the reality of that, and the fact that you said this took me 2 years to really get clarity on, that is, I just love the transparency of that, because that is
get clear, but get the courage to like start to activate and move towards.
So it's the whole it's not only did I get clear and understand what my values were, but that's the time in which it took me to start taking action towards that. Start taking action.
Yeah, because I'm still calibrating, and it's going to take me a hot second. I think it'll probably take me for the rest of this year to be completely honest. Yeah. And that is something that I don't want. What I want to share with our viewers too is, because you're hearing that is
the experience that Fatimah had. And a lot of times it is a process. It's not like I'm going to decide to do this, and then by next week I'm going to have done it, or by next year. It is an ongoing work in progress. And that's not to dissuade anybody from stepping over that fence or trying to take steps towards what they want.
No, because there's no formula.
Not at all.
For me, it took me 2 years. Because I analyzed the crap out of every single thing.
Yes.
And that's part and parcel of who I am, and I accept it.
Right.
But I empathize with people like you, for example, who have, I'll speak about myself because it's not my place to speak about you, but like I had the luxury of solitude. I am a very gregarious person, and I am social, but I keep my circle tight.
Yep,
and my recharge mechanism is hermit mode. That's my Virgo moon. I need solitude to kind of sort my stuff out before I can come back and engage. And so I had the luxury of solitude meaning, no kids, no partner, no house full of folks that are relying on me to, I need this, because, and that's part of the way that I show up for others. I give that 100%. I don't know that I would have been able to, and I think that's God's grace, basically, for me. I've known that I've kind of been a person. I'm shifting now that I kind of have myopic focus, which I'm grateful. And that's a part of me because it's gotten me to where I've been able to kind of break through in terms of glass ceilings and all the things that I've been able to do.
Yeah.
But I think a full life, I'm beginning to realize is one where there's some equilibrium, right? Mm-hmm. Even in that sense, where you're able to kind of have the family, the kids and whatnot, but also take some time for yourself. And as women,
oh my God, yes.
Have a hard time saying, you know what, I need a weekend by myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't be afraid to sit with yourself.
100%.
And I don't mean this in an arrogant way. I swear to God, it's for me to even get to a place to say this out loud. I love my company. I enjoy my company so much because I've had to clear out all the cobwebs and all the craziness and my, cognitive residue. But it took me some focus and a few years, basically.
Yes.
And so you just got to be able to be comfortable to sit with yourself and like really think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't find any arrogance in that. I find I actually am inspired by that, because I think a lot of times we're so, for whatever reason, whether we think we'll be bored or whether we are if I'm by myself and I'm having that pause, I might be forced to think about stuff that is really uncomfortable and I don't want to face and I don't want to think about. It's easier to distract myself than to be with that. So the fact that you worked through your process and now you value so much the time that you get to be with yourself, because you enjoy yourself and you appreciate yourself. And it sounds like you absolutely love yourself, which is such an amazing place to be, right?
It took me 42 years and I didn't realize it. And I got to tell you that the career that I built, which again, I'm beyond grateful for, but I think a lot of that was running and with the intensity of it. I didn't give myself a chance to like just sit down and breathe. I don't know that I wanted it, to be honest with you. And then when the pandemic hit, it was, I'll never forget it. I think it was June or July. I sat down one day on my couch and I was in DC at the time.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, if I go right now, because, when you're running like that and you don't, when I say I was running, I didn't realize I was running for myself. I was totally running for myself. I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
Right? But I shouldn't say, well, I'm not going to course correct. I think a lot of it was I was discovering myself.
Love that. Yep.
Without knowing. And so in that race of kind of running from myself, it's odd, but I kind of looped back around and like passed the baton back to myself. If that makes any sense.
I love that. But I'm such a visual person, and I I love those analogies. And I
Yes.
think that that's such a visual that we all can get behind that visual. I think that was
Well,
so powerful.
I think a lot of folks maybe do it around the block. For me, it was like a globe trot.
Yeah.
I mean, like
it was a journey for you.
It was a journey. It was a
Yeah.
100% journey. And so I in June and July, when I sat down because the pandemic, you know, for me in my 20s and 30s, I was just, you think you're immortal.
Yes,
you don't think about if right now, I have to say, I've always been really good. I've always been really, I shouldn't say good or bad, but I've been conscious of not taking things for granted.
Okay.
I think one of the really good things about me, and when I say things like that, I've worked really hard to talk to myself like this.
Yeah, you probably weren't able to say this.
I never.
A while back.
I would berate myself. But I'm very conscious of not taking things for granted. So acts of kindness don't go unnoticed. Neither do slights, but I'm focusing on the good.
We're human.
We're human, exactly. And so, but you think that you just don't think about, death or,
right.
And for me, death I think has a different meaning, but you just think you have time to do all the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
And when last June or July hit, and there were issues with the vaccine still hadn't hit at that time, and it was still very unclear about how this virus impacted people.
Yep.
Blood type, pre-existing condition.
Oh yeah, scary stuff.
All the stuff. I remember I sat down and we were in a constant state of quarantine, right? So I was spending a lot of time on my own. The only kind of public engagement that I had was like my walks, and that's something that I always had to have, is that I had to get out and I had to exercise. And I thought to myself, if I go right this second, like right now, if God calls me home, what do I want to leave?
Yeah.
What do I want to leave? And I've already, again, it's not arrogance. I just have, because I'm an overachiever and a recovering overachiever and a recovering perfectionist. It takes a lot for me to even say this. There are already things that I've done that will be remembered in terms of career.
Yep.
In terms of what do I want to leave behind? I don't have children. What do I want to leave behind?
Right.
And I used to hear a lot of men use the word legacy. And that never resonated with me.
Right.
I think for me, it's more about wisdom. Like, what do I want to leave behind if I go now? And I sat down on my couch and I pulled out a piece of paper, like old school.
Yeah, I love it. I'm old school. That's what I do too.
Old school. And I've always, and this is what I discovered in this process, there's a huge part of me that's always felt very centered when I write. Even in my career, when I would write briefs or aid memoirs or whatever it was, I sitting down and writing for me, because I'm very structured, very methodical, very linear, helps me kind of. And so I sat down and I wrote bullet points, just bullet points. What do I want people to know? Not necessarily about me, but about life.
Just in life. Yeah.
About life. What do I want people to know about life? And I did not self-censor. I did not.
Love it. I love that better.
I didn't self-censor. I didn't overthink it in terms of, okay, I got to make sure this is sequential, or this is thematic, or this is linear, which is not like.
Which was not like you.
Yeah, exactly. I just was like, what do I want people to know about life? What is it that I know now? Like crystal clear, just like, just you see things so clearly when you realize how finite time is and what a blessing it is to be on this earth. And I don't mean to sound like preachy, but when I wake up every day, I'm like, thank you, God, for giving me another day, no matter what is going on, because, and that doesn't mean I don't have my down days, and that sometimes I like just break down and cry for no reason. I have my stuff. Everybody has their stuff, me included. But I wanted to pass this along.
Yeah.
And when I was done, I had like, I don't know, 120 something points.
Wow.
Bullets. And I was like, God, that felt really good. I really like that.
It's cathartic. It's so cathartic to write, right?
Cathartic. It was so cathartic. And I didn't remember feeling that good in the process of something. And again, I am very careful with word choice, because we tend to think in like zero-sum game frameworks. Like if something's good, the other thing is bad. No, it's just that I hadn't. Natural is a better way to say it, I think. That process had not felt more natural to me than anything that I had done in the last 20 years. Anything.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And another good thing that I've recognized in myself is that in those moments that feel just absolutely effortless, I log it.
You say this is something that I done. That's not even right English. This is something that I've done that felt organic. It felt natural. It wasn't pushed. I allowed myself to feel it. And first thought was my best thought. And I just let it flow.
And
you bank that in your head.
I bank it in my head, I bank it as I need to do more of that. I need to create a space to do more of that.
Yes.
And how do I do that? And then like a stove, I let that pot simmer in the back of my head.
I love it.
That pot simmer while the other 3 pots are, and I got the stove going and the microwave and something.
Right. But even that, and I'm going to call it a strategy, because a lot of when I'm working with clients who are struggling in certain areas, oftentimes we'll work through things like that, and we'll literally have them journal. Why did this feel good to me when I got into action and I actually did this? What were the feelings that on earth? What are the emotions? Because I call that, and I like when people write that down, because on one piece of paper, like every single time I get into action, every time I do something and I identify how it made me feel, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to create a list, because that's going to be my living truth, my living history, that when I'm feeling stuck, or when I'm feeling like I can't, or when I'm feeling less than, or I'm having those moments, I can whip that out and look at all of I can remind myself of those moments. As you said you were doing, the pot is simmering on the stove. I'm going to let it sit there and fester and simmer. I'm going to recognize and identify why this felt really good to me.
Yes. And then I got to like a secret sauce, I got to leave it alone and let it simmer, because then when I'm jogging or doing something else or whatever it is, or taking a shower. Showers for me are like so therapeutic.
Oh my God.
I get like strokes of genius in the shower. And so
there's something.
There's something. I think it's the water. I think it's the water. I have a whole meditation that I do in the shower, 100%.
Awesome.
And so what I realized was the writing felt good. I mean, I quickly became very analytical about it, because I've been operating in the left brain for so long that I needed to, what I didn't realize then was that my soul was knocking basically on my head, my brain, and saying, I need for you to come on over to the right side, right being like the right brain creative side a little bit. And so because of the pandemic and because of the pause, because we all get that knock.
Yes.
Right. But you're so not you, me. I'm so busy. I'm running. I'm catching a flight. I'm finishing a project.
Right. And I think you say you, but I think a lot of us. I think I think I hear where you're going. I'm going to let you continue, but I feel like this. A lot of people can probably connect with what you're saying here.
I hope so, because God knows I'm an excruciatingly private person, And that was one of the toughest things for me in this process, was opening up and being vulnerable. Again, I'm grateful to Brene Brown's works on this, because it's courageous. And she talks a lot about courage, coming from a space of basically love, love for self, love for other human beings, love for everything. Anyway, so when we all get those knocks, but we're too busy catching a flight, engaging a client, doing whatever, going to the next best travel destination, going to the next party, like, I don't know, showboating on Instagram, whatever it is that we all do. And I say we, because I'm human, right?
We all do. Yeah.
When you're forced to pause and you kind of get a chance to sit in your soul space and listen, then your soul speaks and you can hear it.
Yep.
And so I in that process of the bullet points, I was like, okay, the writing, anchor, the inspiration, anchor. But if a tree drops in a forest and no one's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound.
Right.
So the hurdle for me was, I've done a lot of things in my life. I've done live hits on, major broadcasting networks. I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of folks that I'm grateful for. I mean, I've done a lot of things that a lot of folks would be like, that's terrifying, or that's scary, or that's very intimidating. Pushing out into the public space, basically wisdom, I shouldn't say my wisdom based on my life experiences.
Yeah. The things that you wrote down that day.
Yes. The bullet points that I wrote down that day. That for me was cripplingly terrifying. Like, I am such I don't like to show vulnerability. I don't want to show weakness. Which vulnerability is not weakness. It's actually strength. It takes a tremendous amount of strength, and to put yourself out there. And so I got the first piece down, especially with my career.
Yep. And
the second piece was so natural, the inspirational piece, because for me, it's like, if one person suffers through something and kind of gets the cliff notes, why should everybody else have to go?
Well, right. That's right.
Like, be the Sherpa for everybody else,
Right. Don't reinvent. Like, right. Yeah, why not? Yeah. Share the love. Sharing the wisdom for me was sharing the love. And so not that I got it. I'm not like a guru that I have no, there's no magic key here. Everybody has to go through their own journey, their own experiences. Right. But I think, when I got, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I knew the hurdle. So I did that in June or July, but I knew the hurdle would be, okay, could I ever focus on this and not do the really intensive 3D, like international affairs, consulting, communication, that kind of stuff? Would I ever be able to, as good as this felt, would I ever be able to do it publicly? Would I succeed? I mean, all those things. All the reasons why I shouldn't.
Can I make a living? Because I have to make a living. I'm not like, I think my life would be a lot easier if I had a sugar daddy, but unfortunately I have too much conscious for it. But if that's what somebody else is doing, do you?
Good for you. That's right.
For me, it's not my thing. And so I have to make a living. Is this something I can make a living out of? Like, there are all these things that kind of crept into my head. So I was like, you know what? Too much right now. Let me just leave it.
Yep. Yeah. So that's what you did. So you just kind of left it alone.
I left it alone.
Yep. You left it alone. Yeah. And you left it and all, but the your entire experience and the entirety of what you had done and what you put out there, and those really good feelings that unearthed for you as you were doing this, am I correct to say, what kind of halted you from taking that next step was when you started to think about, could I actually do this?
Could I, when I say this, I was trying to figure out, because when I went back and read the 120 something points, I don't want to use the word good, but they were solid.
Yeah.
They were, I was like, when I went back and read the 120 something points, I was like, man, I wish I had this when I was like 20. That's like the thought that I left it alone for a while. And I was like, I wish I had this. And when I went back to revisit it and looked at it, I wish I had this when I was starting out 2 decades ago.
Right.
That's the thought that I had.
What would it have provided for you if you had a way to access these points that you came up with that in that moment over the pandemic, when if you imagine your 20-year-old self had access to these points that you identified, what do you imagine how would that have changed things, or what would that have been like for you, or what would you have realized? I know that's a big question.
No, but that's fair. That's actually a spot on question. That's a fair question. Because, again, I'll speak for myself. When I was in my 20s, I was headstrong, just like I am now.
Yep.
Nobody was going to tell me what to do.
Oh yeah.
P.S. Just like
you
now.
knew it all, right?
No one's going to dictate anything. And so I don't know that it could have, I don't know that it would have, I don't know that it would have changed some of the decisions that I made. And thank God, because I don't want to change one iota of anything.
No, of course not. Right.
But for me, one of the lessons, for example, was aim for interdependence, not codependence. I'd heard the term codependency for maybe 15 years. I had no idea what it meant.
Oh, really?
None.
Okay.
I heard people throw this word around. I didn't really care too much about it, frankly, because I was too busy in like my work or my schooling or whatever, the tangible stuff that I didn't think about. I wasn't in the headspace of like thinking about dynamics, but had I heard the term earlier on, I didn't understand what the term meant or the implications that it had in dynamics. And P.S., codependency, once you understand I'm preaching to the preacher, not even the
yeah.
So I would humbly ask if I can come into your space for a second. But
yeah, of course.
When you talk about codependency, for me anyway, when I finally sat down in my late 30s, early 40s, like very recently, and looked up the definition of the word and started to unpack that Louis Vuitton suitcase, I realized that the dynamics that it talks about is not just relationships, it's friendships, work engagements,
it's everything. It's everything.
And then to add another concentric kind of circle let's add another sugar coating to the Skittle, is basically that if you start to explore where you kind of got instilled with that dynamic, not to blame shift, but where you kind of got that this dynamic is actually okay or acceptable or the natural way of life. That takes a whole nother kind of gamut of healing, basically.
Yes, it does.
And so if I had heard the term earlier in life, if I had heard the term and stopped for a hot second to maybe read it and maybe dismiss it, honestly, but just be cognizant of it, conscious of it, I may have engaged in a different way in different settings. May or may not.
Sure.
God knows. But I'm just saying that's what I mean. And so the points were not like, oh, open a savings account, buy a black dress. It was like the only kind of the deep reflection that you can have as a 40 plus woman looking back on like in hindsight's 2020. And that's why I got the download in 2020, honestly.
Yes.
And so when I read it again after leaving it alone for a while, I was like, I really felt in my heart space and in my soul space that I need to push this out into the world. And I had to like deal with my ego, which if you haven't read, not you, but any of your viewers haven't read, again, Brene Brown talks a lot about this, but Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about the ego.
The ego gets in the way. Yeah.
Yes. And
The
so,
ego. Yeah. Yeah.
oh my God, I don't want people to
We
live.
have to understand that. We have to understand our ego and how it's driving us. And we have to be able to step away from it.
Oh my God, and the ego is not a bad thing. I don't want it, because it's what allows us to kind of operate, or me,
Of
allows me
course.
to operate
Right.
kind of in this plane,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but I learned very quickly, that it was getting in my way, just like you said.
Yep.
One of the other lessons that I had written down in that kind of raw moment, on uncensored moment, was don't mistake confidence for ego.
Yes.
Or don't mistake ego for confidence, excuse me. And so I had to kind of check myself and say, okay, I have an objective here, which is and I want to get this out. At the time it was a very simple thing. Like, I just want other 20-year-olds to have this.
Yeah.
And the commencement for 2020, a lot of people had just had to do it virtually and couldn't
Yes.
walk. And I remembered when my commencement took place, like what a big thing that was. And like that, I mean, that's, you're working your whole, whatever, college trajectory, undergrad trajectory, community college, graduate school, whatever, PhD,
whatever it is.
Yeah.
That moment, that's the rite of passage.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to not have that physical kind of celebration I couldn't imagine it. And so I was like, I just want them to have this. And I called a couple of people in my inner circle, and I was like, listen, I have this thing. and they were like, honestly, I'm really grateful. I don't have a whole lot of people in my inner circle, but the people that are in my inner circle are solid, and
that's
grateful.
what matters.
Yes.
But that's a huge deal.
I'm grateful for them. And I called them up and I was like, I really want to do this. And they were like, well, you can push it out on Instagram, because I have a lot of followers on Twitter. That's from previous roles that I've held. But, Twitter's not really the space for this kind of thing.
Sure.
And I just, they're like, you can do it on Instagram. That's kind of more the creative space. And I was like, oh, is this a creative thing? And they were like, well, I mean, I hadn't even really thought about it at the time that it was a creative venture. And so I was like, okay, I don't know. Again, I left it. It was just too much for me to kind of process. And then in the fall, right around my 42nd birthday, that's when I was like, okay, things need to shift.
Yeah.
There was something inside of me that was like, there's something else you need to do. And again, it's not a zero-sum game.
Right.
Because I will always pull on the experiences of international affairs, diplomacy, consulting. Even now, as I'm shifting over into teaching and public speaking and writing, I'm still pulling on a lot of those experiences.
A lot of those skills that you gained were not for naught. They were
100%, whether directly or indirectly. Right.
Right.
And so, but when I was like, okay, I really want to do this, I called one person and I had a breakdown. Like I had a complete breakdown.
Yeah.
And because what I was struggling with, again, it was basically my ego death. And this is what Eckhart Tolle talks about. I was really struggling with, if I push out these bullets, basically these like 120 something points at the time, that's what it was. In true consulting fashion, I basically gleaned out the takeaway. I sieved out the takeaway from everything.
Yeah.
The takeaway from every experience. And was just ready to hand everybody the cheat sheet to life as I recognized it, basically. Right. The cliff notes, not the cheat sheets, but the cliff notes.
The cliff notes, yeah.
But I knew at some point, somewhere down the line, somebody was going to say, how did you get these lessons? And that's my story. And I was terrified of telling my own story, like the full story.
So that was the bottom. That was at the core of the onion.
That was the core of
that was the resistance that you were having.
That was the resistance I was having. And by the grace of God and this person at the time who was kind of, I have to hand it to them. And I believe that God brings people into into your life and into your journey. And I believe in soul contracts, and people come in and then they go out.
Yep.
And the hardest, 100%, the hardest thing for me has been to release people when it was time to release them. Because again, I got attached. One of the lessons was connect, don't attach.
Yes.
I didn't know the difference. Right. If I had heard that when I was 20, I'd be like, oh, there's a difference. Like, even if I would have dismissed it, I didn't realize that there was a difference. And so people came in when they needed to kind of help me through that moment, and also were released when they needed to be released.
Yeah.
But at the time, once I gave myself a good chunk of time to like really sit with it, grieve, ego death, all of that. But boy, one thing I love about myself is that once I make a decision, it's like, it's
no regrets.
You're good. Like everything moves to it's all systems go. It's like everything starts to crank to go in that direction. And so I'm going to say this and then I'll pause because I know I've been talking for a while, but I wound it up. I cleaned up the points, not in like a censoring kind of way, but I just basically was like, okay, if I'm going to get this out. And if I do, what else needs to be there? And I got to 140 points, and I left it at 140 because I like the number 5. I started writing my memoir, which is basically the backstory from A to Z to everything. And I published the 140, which is now 140 life lessons I wish I knew at 20. I published it on Medium in the middle of November. And if I tell you, I will never forget the moment I pushed publish. What I was like, I think I peed on myself a little bit. I was terrified. But
you did it anyway.
I pushed it out into the world. And what's remarkable about the universe is that when you listen to your soul knocking, the universe will start to send you everything, whether it's courage, people, resources, help, insights, everything started. And people that I've known for decades popped up out of the woodwork to support me, and people that I had like you. We met on Clubhouse, and it was instantaneous.
It was instantaneous. It really was.
And it just clicked.
Yep.
It was painful, but it clicked. Once it clicked, it clicked.
And that I love that point. Like you know, something, when we have those things that just keep knocking at our door, once we accept them for what they are, and once we work past that resistance, that's a huge piece. Like that was a huge turning point for you when you got through, when you understood what your resistance was and you pushed past it, and then you welcomed, the universe was like, all right, she's ready. And started to send you everything. 100%. That I think, a lot of people, we resist. We don't really focus on, what are all these signs? Why do I keep thinking about this? Why do I keep being pulled towards this? Why do I keep meeting people that are aligned with this? Why do I keep seeing things that are aligned with this? And we just think it's a coincidence. We don't really dive deep into it.
No such thing. I don't believe in coincidence.
But as to your story, it makes sense, right? Once, and again, that I know it sounds like a broken record, but it's so important. There's so much resistance that we have to all of these things that we desire and want to do, for all of the reasons. You've shared so many of them in as we're talking here, but what are people going to think? What if it doesn't work out? What if I fail? What if I look like an idiot? What if this, but once we get past our ego and we really identify what's at the core of that resistance, and we find ways to get past it, it's like a blossom, like the flower opens up and all of these things come at us.
I totally felt like a cocoon. I was in a cocoon, and a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. What you just said about fear of judgment, that was crippling for me. I was so scared of other people's judgment, and I had to do a lot of inner work. I mean, a lot of inner work.
Yes.
Because again, I constantly needed that external validation. Constantly. And you know, I'd always come across as a confident person. And I think I was, and I very much am now, I was in my capabilities, but that self-assuredness, I always sought from external. Like, is this the right thing? Do I need to do this? I'm not saying not seeking the counsel, like getting a second opinion. Always, that's one of my lessons.
Right.
Seek the counsel of others, but make your own decisions.
Right. And there's a difference. There's a difference between that. There's a huge difference. Yep.
And another one of my other lessons talks about validation. It's not an external thing, whether it's from a job or a salary or a yes or whatever, an external, it's your inner compass and your inner system knows the direction. It's just quieting the mind and just kind of like telling the ego, like, just sit with me for a second.
Yep.
And just, again, ego's not a bad thing at all, but it will, if you let the ego kind of run its marathon, you'll get to the 26-mile marker and be like, I don't even know that this was my race. Like, I think I should have been running in the Boston Marathon, and I'm in the New York Marathon.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I just, again, there's no wrong decisions. There's no wrong. I believe in my heart of hearts that all roads lead to Rome. I really believe that. And it's either you take the scenic route or you take the shortcut, but you're going to get to where you're supposed to get to. For me, that destination was self-acceptance.
Yes.
In the now.
Yep.
I still have, God willing, if the good Lord allows, decades ahead of me. But
yes, you do.
In that hot second of sitting down with the pandemic forcing everybody to pause. And I had looked back at how, you know, my 20s, everybody's a hot mess in their 20s. I was a hot mess.
100%.
I'm not even like, I was a hot mess in my 20s, which is fine. And then I went to grad school. I've always had my head down doing something.
Yes.
Right. And a part of that was because I flunked out of college my freshman year. And so I was like, oh my God, that's just like, I got to fix that, you know? And so I was like overachieving after that, it was like academic honors, scholar. I mean, it was just like,
it went from one end to the other end.
Yes. Yep. And then my 30s, I just had my head down doing my career. You know, there's a great quote that I heard once in The Great Gatsby by Leonardo, when he was talking, I mean, obviously it's a book, but when they remade it into a movie, and he was talking about climbing. And he said, I always knew I could climb, but I always knew I had to climb alone. And it's that myopic focus, right?
Yep.
And so I was nothing, no distractions. I just had my head down doing the work. And I was just like Billy goating up the hill.
Yep.
And so with the pause, and I had looked back to this tremendous, amazing, grateful career. And even now, I'm not going to allow myself to qualify. I will not. When I got to sit with myself and I thought to myself, what do I really want? And I said, I want a family. And I realized that everyone looked at me as this career woman, and I was, and I am, and I have no shame in that. And I don't like these kind of zero sum, qualification. Like, if you're a career woman, you don't want kids.
You can't be this, right?
If you're a mom, then you don't want a career. Actually, that's not life.
No, it's not.
And again, when I got really still and I paid attention to those moments that I was like, oh, I this feels really natural for me. And this sounds really simple. So one of those was writing. But the other one was like, whenever I walked past little kids, we always made eye contact, and I always smiled, waved at them, whether they were on the bus. And I was like, Thief, which is like my childhood nickname.
Yes.
All my close people, don't ignore that.
No.
Don't ignore. And I don't know where, somewhere along the way, I thought, maybe that's not for me, or maybe that, but actually, no, it is. That's something that I want. And when I got quiet enough to realize, like, I do want a family, and I will have one. It might not be, it won't be the way that maybe everybody else has one with like
and there's
a white picket fence or whatever. I've always wanted to adopt. And so I'm not like freaking out about, oh my God, I gotta, and I will adopt at some point, God willing, in the next few years. And I will have a family. And so I was like, I want to build a life where work fits into my life.
Yes.
Not where my whole life fits into
work. Yes.
And I want to create the space, because that's what a lot of life is, for allowing for this kind of family to propagate, basically.
Absolutely.
And I at the end of last year, once I published that Medium post, it was just like boom, 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 boom. I built a website. I started to pull together courses to teach,
Yep.
and made the 140 lessons basically like a motivational speech.
Yep.
And just recently published the 140 life lessons I wish I knew at 20 into a keepsake reference book, or like
which is
paperback.
amazing. Yes.
It's going to drop next week. And I dedicated it to the classes of 2020, 2021, and 2022, because they're going to need it. And if
Yes,
you
they
really
are.
think about it, all of humanity is in their hands.
Yes.
Like for the foreseeable future. So
Yes.
I want these folks to like I want them to have a head, heart, and soul connection.
100%.
So it just started, and I'm grateful for all the experiences that I've had, because I guess now, as I shifted into the creative space, I've leveraged a lot of my consulting, because I'm very methodical in how
Yep.
I've been, with outputs and social media engagements, and then Clubhouse.
Yes.
And I've had a lot of help from you and from Hera and from other friends and from, my network. And it just has started to kind of bloom, as you said.
Yep.
I still have a international affairs advisory consulting arm. It's still up. It's still running. But I've built out this creative space, which is called AuthenticFi.
Yep.
For my childhood nickname, which is Fifi, and then my value of authenticity.
Yep.
And put it together, AuthenticFi. I, am grateful for the individual who gave me that idea, basically, for the name, because I was like, I don't know what to call this. I don't know what. And they were just like, just call it AuthenticFi. And so
that's so aligned and perfect.
Yes, it's perfect. And I've just been doing the thing, just doing me, and doing it in a way that I still leverage, to your second question, which is like, did you leave everything back? Not really, because I still have I just gave a keynote speech at the University of Massachusetts' Entrepreneurship Center, the Berthium Entrepreneurship Center.
Amazing.
And in that keynote, I talked a lot about socioeconomic development, because it was to a bunch of social entrepreneurs and
Sure.
ventures. But at the end of the keynote, I told them I want to leave you guys with some lessons, some wisdom that I picked up along the way that is specifically designed for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Because that was already in my bullets.
Yep.
And so I've come to a point now in life where everything has converged. Like one of the things that I really struggled with was I felt like my dots weren't connecting. And that's
a struggle, right? You're all over the place, and you're like, when is everything gonna
literally happen? I was literally all over the place, the world, scopes, this, that. And I was like, this year, my dots started to connect. Like this quarter, my dots started to connect. And I was just like, thank you, God, and thank you, soul. And I love how Snoop Dogg is like, I want to thank me, and thank you, me, for actually having the courage to
100%.
follow through with this, and all my
right.
soul tribe who came out of the woodwork to help me, because now I realize my dots are connecting. It's like a Picasso, but it's beautiful.
Right. And I love that idea of the dots connecting and everything falling into line, right? Because for so long we do feel all over the place, but when they start to align and you have that moment where you recognize that, it's so important. And just so many things. This could be like a 3-hour interview, but just I think the everything that you've shared, and the fact that using the word journey, this isn't something that last week you thought of this and all of a sudden now it's happening. This was a process. This was a journey. And again, it's not to discourage anybody. It's the reality that whatever we do, whatever we're driven towards, whatever we keep getting that validation towards, yes, it's going to take work to get there. It's going to take trial and error. It's going to take practice. It's going to take figuring it out. It's going to take understanding what our values are, understanding why this is happening, working through all of the resistance. That's part of this beautiful process. But, you know, it's worth the process, because a lot of times
100%.
people get turned off and they're like, oh, it's going to take a lot of work. Yes, it is. It's going to take a lot of work, because anything worth doing is. But I guess the question to ask, and I want to go back to, you know, just your personal timeline, where you recognize that the initial transformation was essentially a 2-year process. And if you know, somebody might be saying, oh, 2 years is a long time. And but
I don't want that to deter anybody.
No.
It could take somebody else a lot less time, and it could take somebody else a lot longer.
It could, but even just going off of that example, I would say to somebody, even if we had a crystal ball and we knew how long the process would take for an individual, the time spent working through that process, wouldn't it be worth it to get to the other side, to really understand where you're going, versus let me spend the next 25 years of my life wondering if it could have, maybe I could have done that. Regret is in my opinion, regret is the biggest, I'm going to say, like, regret is
remorse. It's the biggest.
Yeah. And I think out of everything in life, like, regret is something I know personally, I never want to have that. And it breaks my heart that other people could potentially have that too. Going through a process and recognizing that it's a process is better than living a life of regret and resentment and all of the other things that come with it. So I think, if, you know, for our viewers that are watching and listening and hearing everything that we talked about, think about that when you're imagining what it is that keeps coming up, what it is that you want to do, what it is that you're sitting on the fence about, owning the fact that it's going to be a process, but even thinking towards the other side of it. If I don't take these steps, if I don't figure out if this is the thing that's going to shift and make all the dots come together for me, am I okay with living with regret or not trying? Is that something that I'm aligned with? And I would...
Sorry, go ahead. Go finish your.
And I was going to say, and I would imagine that most of us would probably sit back and say, I'm probably not okay with that.
Oh, 100%. Okay, there's like 4 things that I have to say, because I know you probably want to wrap, and I just want to say them as quickly as possible. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry, but I thank you for your patience. Number 1.
Thank you for saying that.
One of my lessons, I think it's 139 or 138 out of the 140, is whatever it is you want to do in life, you got to do the work. Whether it's self-acceptance or being a doctor or climbing Kilimanjaro, which I'm going to do, God willing, in the next 2 years, you got to do the work. And for me, what I realized throughout this journey of looking for all these things outside, you know, whatever accomplishment and career, education, whatever, everything I was looking for myself. Yeah. And so once I got to know myself and what I really wanted, and allowed myself to create the space to go after that, things just started to, it's not perfect. It's tough. I worry about a lot of things, like so many things, but I am dedicated. When I think about all the things that I've dedicated my time and energy towards, whether it was graduate school or college or other institutions, I gave myself permission to finally dedicate my time and energy to me and what I want to do, because I can go like that. Yes. Somebody actually asked me if somebody asked me, they're like, have you been diagnosed with a terminal illness? And I said, no, I woke up and I realized that, you know, whether you believe in multiple lives or not, I'm not even going to have that discussion. But for me, like, I'm ready to go back to the mothership. Like, I'm not coming back.
Right.
You know, for me, I like, this is it. I'm in the arena. This is going to be my last run, and I'm going to leave it all on the cutting room floor. And if somebody has something to say about it, they have the space to, that's fine. But my actions and my energy and my focus are not going to be determined by external forces anymore. It's me. This is this is my mission. This is what I came to do. And I've literally developed the thought of everybody.
I love it.
Honestly, I'm just
that's my favorite.
Yeah, I just, and not in like a mean, hurtful way. No. It's just that I'm going to do what I came here to do, and I'm done.
Right.
That's a wrap
Right.
for me. I'm
That's
not,
right.
I believe with my heart of hearts that struggle, I mean, like really challenging life circumstances. I've been through so many things in life. It can either breed resentment
Yep.
or compassion.
Yep.
And I'm a very sensitive person. And I just leaned, and I used to try to hide it. And I've just leaned into it. And
Great.
I've leaned into the compassion, and I just said, I'm just going to push out everything that I can push out and leave it on the cutting room floor for whomever can use it while I'm here or when I go home.
Right.
And that's
right.
it. And that's a wrap.
It. And that's a wrap. And that mic drop. Mic drop. but also, you know, to that point as well, I think that concept of being even in that courageous space where you say, I'm going to dive into that compassion. I'm going to dive into that sensitivity, and that's what I'm going to show, and that's who I'm going to be. And having the courage to do that, you know, courage and confidence is not something that we're born with. It's something that we learn how to do. And the fact that you through your process learned to lean into that and learn to accept that and learn to take that and run with it. I think that that's really, I just think that that's powerful. And all of us have that ability to
100%.
learn how to do it. And those things that we feel are our biggest obstacles are usually the things that are just the opposite about us, right? Once we learn,
your biggest weakness is your greatest strength. And
correct.
Once I realized that my sensitivity, what I viewed as a weakness, was actually my greatest strength, because I felt things so profoundly.
Yep.
And I think the greatest writers are the most sensitive ones.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So this was awesome. And like I said, and I truly mean it, I could have a 3-4 hour discussion here about all of these things, because I feel like we're so aligned, and it's such an awesome conversation. That's quite inspirational to me, for sure. And just watching you and seeing you and watching everything unfold for you. Since January, since we've known each other. I know it's way longer than that,
Suzanne.
But really, you're
incredible. Yeah. And I mean that sincerely. Every time you and I engage, whether it's on Clubhouse or on your show, you always hold such a safe space for the people that enter into your energy. And I can't thank you enough for that. And you always support, and you always show up, and you are just an incredible human being. And to add to one last thing to what you're saying, that whoever's scared, just know that what you need will show up. And you were one of those things for me. So I thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I love watching everything unfold. And I can't wait for your memoirs to come out, for your book to come out. I'm so excited and cannot wait to see the physical copy of it. That's such a huge milestone. So share with our viewers. I know you shared within the conversation too, and we're going to post everything in this YouTube. So everybody it'll be clickable. Everyone will get to see it, but just say AuthenticFi.com is the website.
Yeah. So AuthenticFi.com is the website, and I'll make sure that you have that. And then 140 Life Lessons I Wish I Knew at 20 is going to be up on all the mainstream distribution channels in 2 weeks. So like Amazon and everything. Next week, it'll be up directly from the publisher's website.
Awesome.
And so I will share that link with you. And it's on pre-order now on my website.
Yeah.
And then my memoir will come out afterwards. I don't know when yet, but it will come out afterwards.
It's coming out. And this is it is May 7th. So by the time this does air, your stuff will be out already.
Yeah, the 140 lessons. The FSB 140 will be out. That's basically the takeaway, the life lesson takeaway from memoir. So yeah, thank you for letting me share that. I'm grateful.
Oh my gosh, of course. And thank you, Fatima, for being here with me on this show. I always love sharing space and energy with you as well. And just to wrap up really quick, guys, as I always say, just because you've done everything in life that you're supposed to do does not mean that you've done everything that you're meant to do. And certainly, if anything, if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to connect my dots, I want to figure it out, definitely click a link below to set up a discovery call with me so we can talk about what that looks like for you and get you on your way and get you started into what's next in your journey as well. So thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Fatimah, for being here. I love you. I adore you. And
likewise.
yes, and we'll see everybody here on the next episode.